So when I was thinking about the content for this talk, I didn't want it to be like a full crash course on like what product marketing is, or in terms of what is it that the nitty gritty and stuff on that. But I wanted to keep it based on what does product management and product marketing look like at Microsoft? What's a day in the life of a product marketer? I've had the privilege of having been a product manager as well as now a product marketing manager here at Microsoft. So I hope to impart some thoughts about what's the differences between the two, what are the similarities, and if it's something that you'd like to get into. There are a few nitbits over here, which is like, okay, it's not going to be all that fun and laughter when it comes to being it, because there is a lot of craziness that goes into launching a product. So I'll also talk a little bit about that, like what does it take to launch a product. And so it's going to be really high level, as I said, but happy to dive deeper in Q&A or in career anyway, anything you guys want to talk about more. So that's kind of what I covered over here. We'll talk about product marketing, product management. I get this question a lot. I get this question about like, hey, what is a product manager? What's a product marketing manager? I thought one was the other. I thought they were both the same. And all those answers are right. But there are certain nuances, especially when it comes to which company you are part of or which company you are trying to get into. It's really important to understand the difference between the two and make sure you're applying for the right role, because at Microsoft, we get a lot of people coming in, applying for roles, especially from university hires, actually, who folks come in like, hey, I want to be a product manager. And we get into some of the first or second round interviews, and then it turns out like, well, sorry, like you were looking at something else. So it's really important to have that distinction, especially in a city like Seattle. This distinction is even more prevalent, in my opinion. I think in Silicon Valley, in the Boston area, product manager is usually like, yeah, product manager, and so it's you can either go marketing or you can go engineering and go down that road. But we'll talk a little bit more about that. I'll highlight some product roles in big tech because, as I said, Microsoft looks at this differently, Amazon looks at this differently, Apple, Google, so on. So things keep changing, but I'll still give you a view into what those roles look like today, and I'm hoping that you can find some correlation to what is it that you want to go for then. As I said, I'll just tell you a little bit of a day in the life. This will be the best day I've had at Microsoft, so it's not going to be the worst day. But it is a very real day. So it's really going to be important for you to understand, like this is just a timeline, but there are a lot of things that happen in between. So I'll keep it as real as possible there. And I get asked a lot of questions around like, so what does it take to be a product manager or a product marketing manager? So I'll share some of that insight, very high level. Some of it is something you already know, but if anything, it'll reiterate some of the key things that you want to look at when you go down the path of applying for such a role. There are some resources here because I believe this deck will be shared out. So there are some links in the thing that actually helped me, and then we can get into Q&A. And I'd actually love to spend more time on Q&A. All this is meant to be a foundation for the Uber discussion that we could have. So a brief history of me. And again, this isn't the blueprint. There are many ways you can get into this kind of a career, but I started off with an undergrad in science and economics. I asked the question, so I love numbers, so I'm like, okay, how can I bring numbers and business together? And someone really smart said, well, try economics. So I got into doing my undergrad in science because I was always interested in science. It's something that always was fascinating for me. And then I did economics because I wanted to apply some of this in my career, obviously. So it kind of gave me a really good grounding between how to look at things scientifically and how to understand how markets work, how business works. I then went off. I did some work in between, try to explore what my passion is, where is it that I want to plant my flag, so to speak. But I then got into doing my MBA in strategy and product. So it's really important to understand that your MBA or your master's program or whatever, it's important from the point of view of you knowing what is it that you want to do in life. There is no, that's one of the reasons why product school, it's really filling up a strong niche, because there is really no degree program or certificate program at the university level that says, oh, you are now a product manager. Because it's still so fuzzy, you can come at it from an engineering standpoint, you can come at it from a marketing standpoint. So then I started getting into consulting because as I got out of my degree program, I figured like, okay, let me try and do some cool projects and see if this is really something I want to do. So it was my way of getting into an internship of my own to understand if this is something that I find an interest in. And that's when I joined Microsoft. So I joined Microsoft in 2012 as a product manager. It was a really cool, fun project because we were building out the new ecosystem for e-commerce at Microsoft. So today when you go to Microsoft.com or you go to Microsoft Store, even in retail stores, all of that is built off on the e-commerce platform that we have today. Because that was something that was built way back then, but it was, if some of you remember Microsoft back then, we had like multiple businesses and each business had their own e-commerce platform in a way. So this e-commerce platform became the one Microsoft platform, and which is why you start now seeing a lot of unified experiences when you shop at Microsoft. So that role, when I was a product manager, was like 70-30, 70% technical, 30% business. And I enjoyed it a lot because it really brought me my technical chops to understand architecture, understand technology. When I see a diagram, I kind of figure out what's going on. But I knew that I loved business. I loved marketing. So I wanted to start getting back into that world. So I became a product marketing manager in Office. And I picked Office because it was a mature business, so there was a lot more risk you could play with. There were new ideas being tried out. There were sometimes, there was always some idea also had some sort of a variation being tried out at some point in time of the Office saga. So it was a really cool place to go and try new things, try new innovations, bundle new SKUs and so on. So it was a fun experience. And that's then maybe in a year and a half ago is when I moved over to Azure Data and AI. And the switch was primarily because while I was in Office, I really understood how the cloud worked. And I wanted to go deeper into this world. So Azure Data and AI is a group at Microsoft that's doing really cool stuff around building data technologies that can support AI programs and machine learning programs. And it's a space right now that is making all that fluff you're hearing about AI real. So it is about understanding, like, okay, what does AI mean for a customer, and what are the services and APIs that we build out to support AI technologies going forward. So the challenge of product marketing in this is how do you translate all that amazing knowledge to something that customers can understand? How do you position yourself versus other people who are also doing AI in a very strong way? So it's definitely not like Office. It's not like we're number one. But it is definitely a very volatile and very fast-paced environment for anyone to learn and experience it. So I'm not going to get too philosophical about this, but as you all know, product is an outcome. There are many things that go into product development and product management. There's obviously the engineering and the marketing side. There are finance, market research, legal, branding, communications, and a whole area of teams that come together to launch a product that you see out there. So from a product development and product marketing perspective, these two roles are really the roles that come together, and they sit on top in a way of these other teams because you liaison with all these teams, corral the herd to make sure that everything is checked and balanced before you launch a product. So at any given point in time, even though you are part of a product marketing team, like I'm a part of a product marketing right now, and I kid you not, but I do know my team, but I'm tied to the hip to my product manager. And that's because both of us, we come together and we look at, okay, what are the two big things that we want to talk about? What is the product and who are the customers? That's it. Anytime, any company that you see out there, everything in between are support functions, okay? So there's product and there are customers, and how do you get these two together is basically what we focus on here. And again, not to diminish the value of the other teams here, but other teams, you work with competing priorities, and then you have to figure out, okay, what are the right priorities to work on? What are the timelines you're working on? And then make sure that all this aligns with your engineering product planning cycle. So the focus of what we'll be talking today are really these two roles. As I said, there are plenty of roles out there, but these are the two roles that I'll spend some more light on. This is a very heavy text slide, but really what I try to do here is highlight some of the key skills / priorities of each type of role. So as you can see from an engineering standpoint, you are responsible for the product roadmap. You look at communicating the vision of your product, goals, and features to your engineering teams, aka your devs and your DevOps teams. You focus on defining what the feature requirements are. You try to understand how do you get everything in an agile framework, and what are your sprints going to look like, what your sprints are going to depend on, what are you going to focus on in terms of your features there. You're going to align on what are the product metrics, and this is more like DevOps metrics, like how do you launch, what are you developing right now, how do you go through testing, so on. The planning cycle for the product. Some products have got a 6-month planning cycle, some products have a 3-year planning cycle. So for those of you who remember Office, back when we were like also box products, we were on 3-year planning cycle. We were like constantly churning, like once we launch one, the next couple of years you're working for the next one, and so on. Similar with Windows. So as a product manager, you define what the product what the product planning cycle is for your specific product in that sense, depending again on what the customers and how the industry is doing. You look at your PDLC as well. It's a similar thing like SDLC, but every company does this a little differently. In this case, it's more like, okay, how many times do you test? What are your iterations looking like? What are your experimentations like? And then you outline also what the usability research of your product is. So a lot of jargon in that area, but what it basically means is you are solely focused on the product. You're like laser focused on the product. From a product marketing standpoint, you look at life outside in. You look at life from the point of view of like who your customers are and what you're building inside. Does that really fit your customers? Or the customers, do they fit your product in the sense, are you looking at the right customers at all? You tend to define product differentiation as well, which is what makes my product special? How do you actually go off and talk about this in a general sense? You look at positioning strategy. Positioning is a heavy loaded word sometimes, but positioning basically means where do you play, right? So are you playing in the enterprise space? Are you playing in the consumer space? Are you looking at retail or the financial? Like you have to define where your playground is. The market research plans is what beefs up, what advises you of all these various things that you say, like, okay, I think we should do this. Whenever you say, I think we should do this, it basically means that you need to back it up with a lot of data because no one's going to like go off your opinion for the most part. Product sales strategy. This is a very important one. I don't think a lot of people think about product marketing in this context, but especially when you're part of a big tech company, you are going to need to understand how sales works. You're going to need to understand what drives a salesperson to go sell your product. So many times people think about marketing, at least from product marketing, they think about it like, oh, I need to focus on how do I get my customers to buy stuff. But equally, if not more importantly, you also need to make sure how do you convince your internal vast sales force to go sell your stuff. And that tends to become an Achilles heel sometimes, especially when you have like a vast sales force that has a ton of products to go sell. So you are kind of competing with other products within your own company to go and tell like, hey, sell my stuff first. So it's really important to understand how sales works, what motivates a salesperson to go and sell your product to. Product messaging is critical as well in the sense that messaging is basically the manifestation of your product strategy. It is how do you communicate to your customers? Is it through a blog, through social? Sometimes you also get influencers to talk about you to other people, and so you have to tell your influencers, talk about this like this about me to other people. And messaging also looks at what is it that you're trying to tell for the future. Like you have to have some element of your product vision, as well as your plan, and as well as what your customers can expect in the future. So it gets very tricky when it comes to understand, like when you're trying to talk to multiple customer segments with one blog. You need to figure out how do you separate that blog in a nice way that there's something for everyone in that piece. And then go-to-market strategy and metrics. So I'll talk a little bit, so I'll leave this point actually for later, but go-to-market is a process. There are many milestones that happen in go-to-market. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but every go-to-market plan is different. Even if it's for the same product, depending on the timing by which you are launching something, if you recently launched something, if you're going to launch something in the future, it is always changing. So whenever you have a go-to-market plan, it's very rare that you can go back to like your plan from last year and be like, yeah, I'll just use the same stuff going forward. So it's very, very different, but we'll dive a little bit deeper in that. And then developing sales and partner readiness. So what this means is most times when we launch a product, we also have to develop training programs for the sales folks. So like there would be a room like this with the sales folks coming in and being like, okay, so what are we launching next quarter? And then you walk through everything, you answer questions. Sometimes the best tests of how good your product vision is getting in a room with your salespeople, because they will ask you every root question that they get asked when you have a product that goes out. So we actually call it root FAQ. So when we launch a product, we build an FAQ called root FAQ, which has got every root question in there, like why do you exist, kind of thing, you know. So that's really the broad brush strokes of what a product manager does for the most part and what a product marketing manager does. But what's important here is that both these plays come together to create your product vision. So even though this looks like it's a step-by-step process of doing things, when you get into a room with your product manager as a product marketing manager, you walk through all these things thinking about like how life is going to look like in the future. So you need to be prepared about, like, you need to have a perspective and opinion on the world. So some of the hardest days for a product marketing manager is usually the first week in their job. I know most jobs, the first week is really hard, but I feel this is a little harder because your product manager comes in and be like, okay, so what are we going to do with this? And they expect you to have an opinion of all this. So you could get your opinion wrong once, but this next time you go into that room, you better have it right with your market research and whatnot. So so having the idea of what this means for your product before you get into a go-to-market strategy is super important. Again, I won't dive too much into this because I think we talked about most of it, but I highlighted some of the big skills that go into a product manager and a product marketing manager's job. Know this, like the visual is meant to show you that there isn't a line that's drawn between a product manager and a product marketing manager. You tend to need to know both things. The most important thing is being the technology savvy piece. Your product manager will expect you to understand how your product works. You don't need to be coding it. You don't need to understand if it's C# or Python or whatnot, but you need to understand this is how the product works. This is how the product will be used. Especially when you get into the cloud, like if you're going to AWS or Azure or Google Cloud or whatever, it gets a lot more technical. So you need to understand how that works, because it starts to become like, do you even understand your product? That's what your product is, the technology. Another piece I'll highlight here is like use case scenario development, this piece here. Use cases are super, super important to understand how do you write use cases. And what a use case is basically, how does your customer use your product? What are the ways in which your customer can use the product? Because when you launch a product, you need to be able to tell a customer, this is what you do. You know, I don't know if you guys have been to Daiso, and it's like this really cool Japanese departmental store. And if you look at the way the Japanese have done their packaging, and like every packaging, no matter how simple it is, has like steps in terms of, okay, this is how you use it. It's fantastic. So you don't even need to understand the language to know how to use the product. Amazing. But that's really what you need to do, especially when you talk about complicated products. You need to be able to tell your customer, this is how you use it. A very simple example is enterprise customers today, like your Boeings and the Walmarts of the world, want to get into AI, right? They don't understand what AI is. They understand like, oh, we get what AI is, like it'll tell us what the customer is thinking. It's not exactly. But when we built services and products like AI products for Walmarts, who are our customers, and Boeing, who are our customers, and all these other enterprise customers, hypothetically, then we need to be able to tell them like, this is what this technology can do for you. And so when you communicate this value to them, they want to understand, I get it. So that's what this does. Okay, now I'm willing to buy a subscription. So being able to define use cases for your product, super important. This is something that your product manager and you do together. Because if you say customer does X and then Y happens, your product manager will be, no, that actually doesn't happen. X and X.1 happens and then Y happens. So it's really important to have that good relationship. As you can see, sometimes like I know friends who have like left product manager or product marketing manager roles because there's been trust issues between the two roles. Trust is really important between these two roles in any company. So I usually advise people going through interviews that make sure that no matter what you're applying, I'm sure the interview loop will include it, but make sure that if you're a product marketing manager, that you get to speak with your product manager in your interview loop, because if you guys don't click, it's not going to work out. So, and vice versa, right? Big question I get asked, do you need to have coding experience? No, you don't need to know coding. As I said, you need to be technology savvy. You need to understand how APIs and architectures work. Unless you're applying for a product manager role where they'll ask you to like parse a string or something, a product marketing manager, you don't get asked coding questions. You get asked about, can you tell me how, can you just like tell me about how Uber started? You know, what went into Uber building out their app? You talk about like, well, they must have a database because you've got so much information. They must have a UX over there. They must have a backend stack to support compute or whatnot, and they must be all in the cloud. So you get asked a lot about the technology, but you don't get asked coding questions, all right? Again, even for product managers, I would say, you very rarely get asked to go and code something. What they may ask you is like, hey, tell me how would you design a ride-sharing API? And so you walk through that process, but very, very, very rarely would you ever get asked coding. So don't let this frighten you from getting into or for applying from these kind of roles. Even though the job description sometimes says undergrad or like a bachelor's degree in comp sci, that is true, but they also say or a relevant technical field. So it is important to understand, like don't shy away from this. There are so many people I know who have not applied to amazing roles that'd be fantastic at because they're like, oh, I don't know coding, and that's a myth, okay? So this is my attempt at explaining to you what the roles look like in big tech today. And again, it's like kind of complicated. But I also have sort of aware because things keep changing. So take it with a grain of salt. But if you see the broad strokes of these companies typically have a product manager, a program manager, a technical product manager, a product marketing manager, a non-technical product manager. You guys will probably see this in Amazon. They have like senior product manager, non-tech, senior product manager, tech, non-tech, and then a technical product manager here as well from a marketing standpoint. It is super important to understand what role you're applying for, okay? What we have been talking about as a product manager and a product marketing manager, this is product marketing, all right? So you have product manager non-tech, and technical product manager, or technical product marketing is also how they call themselves sometimes. On the engineering side, you have product manager. You have a ton of program managers as well. I think Apple, if I'm not mistaken, they have a ton of like EPMs, engineering program managers. But when you look at a program manager, you're talking about a PM role that is very, very technical. Now at Microsoft, we also have business program managers. And that tends to be a little bit less technical, but I think that's a little unique to Microsoft that we have business program managers. For the most part, you will see program managers as an engineering side of life. And then you have product managers technical, which is pretty simple. They are technical product managers. So the intent for showing you this visual is that you need to understand what you're applying to. Everything that I just said I hope gives you an idea about where do you fall in between. There are, programs like at product school that when you go through these kind of certificates, you can, if you are not a technical person, you can get away with going on the other side. But just be ready to be asked technical questions and don't get flustered. Be able to answer those questions in a way that you can be like, hey, I know this, or this is as far as my technical depth goes, and so on. In this world also, you'll be asked about technology, but not from a coding perspective. You'll be asked about it like, tell me how this app works, or design. I was asked once, design a AI-powered globe. And it was a very fun experiment. I think I lost myself into it. But it was more like, yeah, just design the product. Don't tell me about, we'll use HTML or what API. Just tell me what the product looks like. So that kind of idea about being able to use technology, understanding how the cloud works, understanding how AI kind of works, so on and so forth, depending on where you're applying, that's where this role goes in. All right, happy to answer more questions on this later here. So now I'll walk you through a day in the life, or a day in the month, I guess, of a go-to-market plan. So when we are launching a data and AI product, which is considered emerging tech, brand new, something that takes a lot of convincing to do, you first start out with a vision and a strategy paper. This paper is maybe like 2 or 3 pages. It has components like what is the market, what's the problem statement, what are the use case scenarios, what do you want to do with this, what is this going to accomplish, which customers, so on and so forth. This is the paper which gets floated quite a bit around. You get a lot of feedback. You get a lot of nods, no's. We call them no-go meetings. You go into a go, no-go meeting, which is like, yeah, makes sense, sure. Or very rarely is there a no-go. It's more like go get more information and let's talk later again. But that becomes your founding paper. From there, you work with your product manager to figure out how do you slot this piece of work into the product planning cycle. Very important stage. You might be able to get everyone on board to be like, this is the next best thing since sliced bread, but if you don't get into your product planning cycle, it's not going to happen. And you're possibly going to even miss the window when you want to launch your product. So that is a very important time to do that. Once your product manager says, yep, makes sense, let's do this, then it starts getting to product development. So you go into sprints, you go into testing. You, again, stay very close with your product manager to understand how development is going. You try to get into, are we looking at stuff in is it still turning out to be what our vision and strategy people look like? This is where you start getting into feature specs. So I don't know if you guys know of BRDs, like business requirement documents. That happens between the product planning and the product development stage, and then you get that submitted, and then you start getting to feature specking with the product development stage. So the biggest thing as a product marketing manager, what you want to focus on is you probably want to print out your BRD or your vision paper and make sure every day, okay, what's being built, does it match the product that we want? Because it's very easy for things to get a little, outside the lines, and then you start getting a product like this is definitely nothing at all what we wanted. So very, very important to keep an eye on what your intent is, what your vision paper is, what your BRDs are, and what is getting developed. Does that match that or not, right? And there are a lot of iterations that go over there. Then we get into analysts and community reviews. So I don't know if many companies, I'm sure many companies do this, but at Microsoft we are pretty good about this, which is at this point, we engage an analyst. All right, we get into we engage a Forrester or a Gartner, some SME, some visionary out there who has a say in terms of what's a good product and a bad product and whatnot. And we talk about hey, this is what we are planning. And it's always under NDA, so there's no leak or anything that happens at this point. But the analyst sits with us and be like, okay, what is it that you guys are trying to do? Yeah, I think the market is looking at going this way. Maybe you want to add another feature like that. Or maybe that feature that you're talking is amazing. It's kind of like benchmark because others do it too. They give us a very good checkpoint without having to go out in the market and be like, hey, this is what we're doing, to tell us yeah, this is how the industry is really going. So you want to focus on maybe tailoring this a little bit, going a little bit that way and so on. It's a really important checkpoint because because imagine between when you have your idea to now, you probably a few months have gone down the line. So maybe the market has changed, maybe something new is coming up. So these analyst reviews help us stay grounded to hey, what we're building here, does that really make sense? What do you guys think? We pay a ton of money, by the way, for making sure that we get as much input and feedback as possible. Community reviews are, especially in the data and AI space, communities are like, your open source communities, right? And so we have certain influencers who are, or committers is what we call them, who are part of the Microsoft ecosystem. We go to them and be like, hey, this is what we're building. What do you guys think? Would the community like it? Would customers enjoy it? Would people understand it? Sometimes we have built things that are too far out in the future. We're like, yeah, but you guys need to first get A, B, C before you look at X, Y, and Z. So we get a lot of insight from the community as well. But this is the point where we do a reality check, so to speak, with like, are we going the right way, or are we missing the point here? Did we miss the boat? So on and so forth. And there are products and features which get nipped at the bud over here, when it's like, now maybe like shelve it for FY22 or something. So provided that we clear that and we're like, yep, no, this is still really relevant, let's focus on it, we get into the business model and pricing strategy. So another role I didn't talk about are like business planners. They are, I think at Google, they're like business strategy and ops is what they call themselves. But business planners are focused on pricing and packaging. So at this point, we're like, hey, we have a product. We want to know how do we price it? So they go off and they figure out what the business model looks like. Is it a consumption business or a subscription business? What kind of meters do we set up? Is it going to be attached to another product or no, and so on. So they are the ones who go figure out like what the pricing looks like. This is where we figure out also, hey, what kind of money can we make on this thing? Like, what is the buying power? What's the entry price point, and so on. So at this point, the product marketing manager and business planner comes very close to each other, because the product marketing manager tells the business planner, like, this product, these are the 3 things that differentiates this product. So we need to price it appropriately. Then the business planner goes like, okay, so you're not talking about those other 2 things. You're talking about these 3 things are super important. Got it. Let me go and price these accordingly. And then you can have a full MRP price for your product. So another very close relationship. So at this point, the relationship between the product manager and the product marketing manager becomes a triad, where it's the product manager, the product marketing manager, and the business planner. These 3 folks come together and pretty much have like recurring weekly reviews after this to make sure that everything is still the right way. If there is a feature that got dropped later on, then the business planner needs to know so that we don't price for that product, so on and so forth. So this is where having a good knowledge about finance helps, because you never want to be completely dependent on the other person telling you. You want to be able to challenge stuff that happens too, all right? Then you get into a private preview. So this is a big milestone, I will say. A private preview is also called by invite only. So now you have your product, you have your pricing, your product is technically really ready, but you invite a few key customers. You say like, hey, I'd like a pay product school. I'd like you to come and try this product free of cost. Don't worry about it. Let us know how it goes. So private preview is kind of like the first real test of the product. It is a time when the product is not robust enough, because we don't want to open it to too many people, but it's enough for us to have 2 or 3 customers by invite only to try the product. Gets us really good input around like, wait, you're charging what for that? Or, oh yeah, that feature is kind of okay, but hey, this is fantastic, by the way, this is amazing, or this just broke. So a lot of really good information comes from here. Then from the private preview, you get information about what is the first thing the customer says. How are they talking about the product? What is important to them? So this is where you go off and you build what we call an MPF, which is a messaging and positioning framework. This becomes your product marketing strategy, on paper at least, where you talk about like what differentiates the product, who are your competitors, what are your price points, what are your differentiating features, what else, like copy in terms of like what is your website going to look like, how are you going to engage influencers, so on and so forth. So this messaging and positioning starts to become the viewpoint into what the future is going to look like when you launch this product. Very, very important. This one also goes through a bunch of executive reviews and whatnot, so you want to make sure that it's very well ticked and tied and incumbent of everything else that's happening before it. Then you get into a GTM and disclosure strategy. This is a little different from your messaging and positioning strategy because GTM is like on the ground stuff. Which event are you going to launch at? Who is going to talk about it? How is your social, what's your social plan going to look like? What are you going to do on SEO? Who's going to write your blog? Things like the field guide. Who's going to write up your field guide? What is the name, the official name of your product going to look like? Naming is a very big exercise because it needs to, especially in a company like Microsoft where like you typically, if there's a really awesome name, someone's already taken it. So you want to make sure that there's a name that's very unique for what you're calling it and it's easy enough to understand, specific. So it goes through a bunch of reviews there. But this is when all that happens. This gets a little bit more like, years to the ground about like how is this actually going to play out starting T minus 10 days from your launch. Yeah. So once you have that, you are pretty much ready to launch. And the first official, like full-blown launch is your public preview. You will see that very, very few times would anyone say, oh, here's a public preview of a product. But remember, no one knows about your private preview. So when you actually hear a product is previewing, it's actually a public preview. So, but we call it public preview to differentiate it from the private preview, or like something can really go wrong really fast. So, yeah, so the public preview is when your product is out there. It's officially in the market. Everyone's looking at metrics. Everyone's screen has dashboards all over them for the next few weeks. It's a very interesting time. Bottles get popped and whatnot. Some of the key metrics that we look at is really, sometimes going on Twitter and like just seeing like how people are responding, what are customers saying about the product, what are influencers saying about it, so on. And then, guess what? We do another round of analysts and community reviews. It's like, hey, so we have gone with this public preview. Now, you may ask, like, but why do you now need to do it? It's not like you're going to do anything after this. Well, you still have the real big official launch, which is you're going GA. So at this point, you want to make sure that your GA moment, which is the last launch, the official launch, full-blown out there launch that's going to happen, happens right. So you want to make sure you ask analysts and community folks about how is this happening? How are we doing? Did public preview work out? You may ask a question as to what's the difference between public preview and GA then? Well, sometimes public preview tends to be fewer features. It's like, hey, this is coming, beta version, it's coming. Or it's like, here's the full product, but it's at a 50% discount because it's a preview version. We just want you guys to try it and see what happens with it. So when you're looking at your public preview, you're really just trying to get the feel of the market. But when you go GA, sometimes we may even go and change the price because we're like, hey, preview turned out to be too expensive. We need to change the price. All right. So that really marks the end of your cycle. And it's at any given point in time, you are doing like 2, 3 GAs, 4, 5 public previews in a span of 3 months. It gets really crazy. But the important thing here is like, at every single point in time, you keep measuring and you're iterating. As you can imagine, that it does look like a long timeline, but every product feature, as I said before, every GTM is very different. Sometimes your analyst reviews take so long because you have to go back to the drawing board, but sometimes you just you breeze through it in a way that is so easy to be done. So you're just skipping steps and you're done. I think the fastest GTM I've done was 2 months when we GA'd MariaDB, another database for Azure. So it was a pretty fast one because it actually went really smoothly. So still it took like 2 months. So yeah, this is basically a day in the life of a product marketer. You get angles of what product management looks like too. Know that even though it looks like the product manager pretty much is done over there, in all of this, you're giving feedback about the product back. And we're like, hey, listen, for this date over here, make sure you have this feature, or make sure you cut that feature, or make sure it's more robust, and so on. So there's a lot of iterations that happen, which is why I said, if you are not clicking with your product manager or vice versa, there's going to be trouble in a way. So this is, I guess, the last topic here. But the idea about how do you get a job in product marketing. And this, please note, this is not a formula. This is purely based on the fact of how I think you can get a job in this world. It's how I got a job in this world. But the first step you do is you research job descriptions, right? You're learning about these jobs. That's why I probably spend too much time on it, but it's really important to understand what is it that you're going for, a product marketing manager or a product manager. Check out the job descriptions. The buzzwords that I mentioned up there, especially in the slide 2 or 3, which had the highlights, those are the actual words you will see in job descriptions, and that should give you an idea, is it a product manager position, is it a product marketing manager position? Don't go by just the title. Apple, for example, have hybrid product manager. If you're called a product marketing manager, you're also a product manager. Amazon, sometimes, if you're a senior product manager, you are also a product marketing manager. So don't go by just the title. Take a look at the job description and see what words are showing up in that area. Read online. Definitely, there are some resources I have after the slide, but you can see a ton of content online. But don't get flustered. Don't get confused. It's actually not that complicated. If you're focused on a few companies, it should be very easy. And discover your gaps. Super important, because when you are applying for a role, know that the minimum qualifications, for the most part, for these job descriptions, yes, they are the bare minimum that you need. You have to have them. The preferred ones, though, in my opinion, if you have a preferred one and you don't have a minimum one maybe, you still should probably apply for the job, in my opinion, because you can actually talk about hey, I have a gap here, but this is what I'm awesome at. Let's talk, But how do you communicate? You have to network. Reach out to people through LinkedIn. I've gotten every job, every internship through LinkedIn. It's fabulous. But it's super important to network, because at least it tells you what roles not to go for. Super important. Then when you're starting to prepare, you have your shortlist. You know, okay, this is what I want to go for. When you are preparing, make sure you align your resume with the job description you're applying for. Now, I'm not saying fake your resume. All right, it's very different. Do not fake your resume. When you say align your resume, if you have done, experiences are huge, right? We talk about so much, we've done so much in our lives in a span of 1 year. But your resume is 1 page. So when you're applying for a JD, talk about the things that JD is asking for from your experience. Don't go on if you're talking about product marketing manager, don't talk about when you were bartending in school. You don't need it. It doesn't help. So align your resume with the JD and do some work with that, because so many times I see resumes come over and I'm like, this resume has got nothing to do with the role. And it looks like it's a generic resume. It's like a fat fingered, let's just apply. So it helps. It tells the recruiter, tells the hiring manager, listen, there are things in this resume that this person is good at. Not only that, but it helps you with SEO. If you have little buzzwords in your resume from the job description, you're like, yeah, keywords get matched. Let's do this. Then add skills and opportunities. So it's really important to highlight not just about what you accomplished in your resume, but also what was the skill that you used to accomplish that. A lot of people are like, hey, I accomplished so-and-so, I got $100 million revenue for this product. But what did you do at it? Did you talk about it? Did you write about it? Did you do what did you do? So it's very important not to get so fixated on the impact, but talk about the skill that leads to the impact. You are trying to convey, nobody wants to hear about how awesome, what did you do amazingly for this other company you are dying to leave right now? Doesn't make sense. They want to know what did you use? What skill did you build to accomplish that for that company? So very important. Be unique. It's a very cliche term, I know, but it's more like be yourself kind of thing. There are so many resources out there that tell you this is what your ideal resume looks like. This is what the words you should use. This is but it's important to understand that be yourself, be unique, because at some point you're going to interview, right? That resume is going to get you to an interview, and if your resume doesn't look like what you are interviewing, there's going to be a problem, and most people get to see that. Trust me. And again, network. As you are starting to see, that's my underlying theme over here. But even in your preparation, do mock interviews, reach out to people. People love talking about what they do, okay? No matter what, I think. Hence I'm here. But it's really important. You can definitely reach out to so many people and be like, hey, tell me more about this role. I'm trying to apply to this. I don't know what it is. LinkedIn is your friend. It's fabulous that way. Definitely come to things like this, find mutual events that you can reach out to. But it's super important to network while you're preparing, because that is where you're going to be the best setup you're going to have for your interview, all right? There are people who come into interviews and you can see like they already know the answers to the questions we're going to have. Very, very cool. Target. Now, this is more around like how, okay, you've prepared for the specific role. Now, how do you target? How do you act? How do you go for it? It's really important to understand that when you are reaching out to people to know more, try to think about what the culture of that company is it's applying. I know it takes some work to understand like, well, what is the culture of Apple? I don't know. Well, find out what's important for them, okay? I know at Microsoft, it's really important about being inclusive. It's about being, having customer empathy, right? It's about making sure that our products empower people to achieve their best selves. Like these are, you will start seeing this. Just go to like the about us of the company. You'll start seeing like what are the principles this company aligns to. Make sure that when you speak to people, when you network, when you apply, when you write a cover letter or whatever, make sure that you have that kind of a culture that comes out. It matters. That's what differentiates you. Because so many times people talk about themselves and try to, again, over-rotate on being yourself, but then you forget about, well, what is the culture of the company and are you a cultural fit for that? Really important. Include company speak. So again, use the buzzwords that you're seeing that Amazon's using or Facebook is using or whatnot. And how do you know this? You network. Keep networking so that you figure what those buzzwords are. And then you apply. So the great application. Now, as much as I would advise folks to like, definitely go and just apply online, to be very transparent with you, there are billions of people, or at least hundreds of millions of people applying online. If you want to really have a good fighting shot, make sure that you apply with a referral. How do you get a referral? You network, right? So you can apply and wait. People get jobs like that. It's not a problem at all. People do get jobs. It's a great way to get a job, I'm sure. But it's really important to apply with a referral. Otherwise, you're not doing everything you can, right? Especially in a city like Seattle. It's not like we're in the middle of Idaho, right? In a city like Seattle, you have Amazon, Google, Facebook. Everyone's around here. It's so easy to find people, at least someone to talk about. And you don't have to find, if you find a referral in that role, in that segment, in product marketing or great. Even if you don't though, referral systems in companies are like any employee can refer. Anyone can refer anyone. So it's really important to understand if you can get a referral, you're going to help yourself so much. When you apply, make sure you tell the people who you've networked with that you've applied. Okay, it's not arrogant, it's not being overbearing or anything. It actually helps quite a bit. Because they feel like they're part of the process with you. And if they can keep an eye out, great. And don't stop learning. So the reason why it's an open-ended arrow, it's a numbers game, right? So when you're looking at roles, when you're thinking about job descriptions, you keep doing this. You maybe not do too much of the learn because you've learned a lot, but you keep preparing, targeting, applying, preparing, targeting, applying. So it's really important to make sure that you have a very good sense of what you're applying to, do this process over and over again. And I promise you, it's not going to be hard for you to get a role you want. You might have some of the experience even, you still have a fighting chance. Companies are hiring amazingly right now. They have been for a long time. Product managers and product marketing managers, these roles are everywhere and new positions are popping up all the time. The way that you differentiate yourself is based on how much you understand of what I just said and having that context when you're networking and applying for these roles as well. So I said there were some few resources. These are links out there. One of my favorite is Good Product Manager, Bad Product Manager. Really awesome. Tells you exactly now see, they don't talk about product marketing manager like Ben Horowitz. He doesn't talk about good product marketing manager, go bad product marketing manager. He talks good product manager, bad product manager because a product manager is a product manager in that sense. It's product marketing or whatever a company may call it, that's fine, but you are a product manager, so look at it from that point of view. Cracking the PM interview, by the way, that book it's really nice. It really goes through a lot of context about in a way it's actually, I feel it's over preparation, so read it just like if you're feeling bored. But it's a really fun way to understand like what does it take to interview and how do you interview.